Welcome back everyone. In this short video, we're just going to take you through the actual structure of all the modules that are to follow, so you've got a really good idea of how things are going to flow. So obviously you guys are in module 1 right now, which is Welcome to EP, where we're doing like a lot of housekeeping, setting up for the theory and the practical stuff that's to come, but we'll just give you a brief rundown of these other modules as well. So after the Welcome to EP one, which is the one you're in now, module 2 is Trauma Part 1. So trauma is split up into 2 parts because there is just, my God, so much to cover when it comes to that. So part 1 is, what is trauma? We're going to talk about developmental trauma, acute trauma, pre-conscious or pre-cognitive trauma, intergenerational trauma, and collective trauma. So we're really covering the whole gamut of different kinds of trauma that come up for people, and you will see them all in yourself and also people that you're going to work with. We're also going to finish up that module by talking about resourcing, because resourcing is a big part of the process and very, very important. Module 3, which is Trauma Part 2, we're going to start to talk about the nervous system and polyvagal theory, so around the neuroscience of trauma, which is really fantastic information that's been coming out lately. Trauma and memory, how memory works when trauma is involved, things like explicit, implicit, false memory, all of that kind of stuff. Identity and trauma, how really trauma forms our world and self-view, or our identity or persona, so to speak. Trauma and relationships, so there's a lot to cover there. Trauma bonding, codependency, all of that kind of stuff. Trauma in our worldview, which I touched on before as another video. Also the importance of nervous system regulation. The bottom-up approach versus the top-down approach. You know, the subheading for embodied processing is the bottom-up approach to healing trauma and nervous system regulation. We're going to talk about the differences between those two, and also working with and meeting sensations. There's a lot to cover in those trauma modules. Module 4 is foundations as a practitioner. This is now really getting you prepared for having people come in. You know, whether it's you're taking this course and you haven't seen clients before and it's going to be a new experience for you, or if you're already a therapist and you're adding embodied processing to your tool belt, this is going to be a very, very important module for you. We're going to be talking about holding space as a practitioner, what that actually means and how we can do that. Becoming attuned to our own nervous system states when clients are coming in for sessions. Attunement with a client. What type of mirroring, relaying back what clients are saying. Nervous system regulation, not just with ourselves, but with the client themselves, which we call co-regulation. Sharing your experiences with a client, yes or no, this can be an interesting one, which we'll touch on and talk about. And then traps that practitioners can fall into in sessions that we've seen over and over again, because myself and Matt, we've not only worked with many, many clients, we've worked with many, many practitioners in this space. So we'll talk about the traps that people can fall into, and also growing in capacity. So growing in our own capacity as a practitioner, as well as helping our client grow into their own capacity. And that's something that we will talk about quite a lot throughout the other modules. Module 5 is emotions. We talk a lot about emotions. What are emotions? Why they're so important? Developing emotional awareness. Shame versus guilt, how to work with shame. I mean, shame's such a big one. Shame is what kills people, and we'll talk a lot more about that. Anger, primal rage, the belly and the jaw, where we're holding emotions, where we're holding tension, all very interesting stuff. Working with fear and that feeling of annihilation and terror and that survival mechanism. Also emotional survival patterns, the addiction or suppression of positive or negative emotions, really interesting topic, as well as craving and aversion, the difference between emotions and states, and also sympathetic versus parasympathetic emotions. So a lot to cover in the emotions module. Module 6, we move on to conscious, unconscious, and the body. So we talk about the conscious mind versus the subconscious mind, the body being part of that subconscious mind, our unconscious core beliefs about who we are as a person, also the language that the unconscious mind uses and how we can start to translate that language into something that both ourselves and our client can understand. Also, can we make true conscious change? We'll talk about unconscious self-sabotage. Who actually programs our subconscious mind? Making the unconscious conscious. Also, seeing through core beliefs instead of trying to constantly try and change them. And also the final part of that module is working with resistance, which is a big one in ourselves and for clients. Module 7, we're going to talk about addictions, what addictions actually are, traumas, addiction, and the polyvagal theory and how that relates to addictions. Sympathetic versus parasympathetic drugs. Are we all addicted? A good module, that one. We're going to talk about the addiction pyramid, drug and alcohol addiction, behavioral addictions, food addictions. Addiction is actually being a gateway to healing and coming back to our real self. Compulsion to escape. the driver of all addiction, rules for working with addicted clients, and also the importance of community and external support. So we're really going to cover the whole gamut of addictions in that module. Module 8 is trauma and spirituality. We spoke about before, there's the traps in the healing world, and there's spiritual traps involved in that. Also, trauma can be a gateway to coming back to our true spiritual self, and we're going to talk about that a lot in that module. We're going to talk about the upward or the downward path, spiritual bypassing, our pure awareness, the three brains, the head, heart, and the gut, existential trauma, past life trauma, whether that's real or whether it's metaphor. We're going to dive into all that. Archetypes and symbols. There's a lot involved in the trauma and spirituality module. We're also going to talk about identity. And then module 9, we get to the nuts and bolts. We get to the actual process. So we take you through. There's a flow chart to download, which takes you through the whole process. There'll be, I don't like to call them scripts, but kind of an outline of how that all flows. So you're going to have all this stuff ready for download. There's going to be how to conduct an initial session versus subsequent sessions. There's going to be a session sheet to download. So everything that you're going to be able to need, especially early on, to be able to deliver EP is going to be all involved there. And then there's going to be many, many, many videos on each part of the process, the techniques, how to start a session, how to finish a session, how to resource, how to process emotions, how to find the origins of the emotions. There's a lot in there, as well as demo sessions as well, which we will you'll be able to watch and go through. And once you have the understanding of how the process works, it'll all make a lot more sense. But there's a lot of theory that's very, very, very important to go through before we get to that module 9, which is the actual process. So guys, I hope you're as excited as we are for all that is to come, and we'll see you all in the next video.